Some acts of kindness are small, like holding a door, or giving someone a smile. But then there are the rare acts, the kind that can only come from a heart filled with true compassion. Acts that change lives forever. This is the story of a single father who didn't have much to give, yet he gave the most precious thing of all, a piece of himself, to someone he had never even met. What he didn't know was that the woman he saved was one of the wealthiest and most powerful CEOs in the country, a woman who had everything money could buy, except love. Before we begin, I want to ask you something. If you had the chance to save someone's life, a total stranger, would you do it? Would you risk your comfort, your future, your stability, for someone you didn't know? Hold on to that thought as we begin this story, because by the end, your heart may answer differently. But before we jump in, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment on this video. It helps your channel name continue sharing powerful and inspiring stories that remind us what kindness truly looks like. And after listening to this story, tell us in the comments, what would you have done? Now, let's begin. Michael Turner was a 38-year-old single dad living in a small town in Ohio with his 9-year-old daughter, Lily. His life wasn't easy, but it was filled with love. Michael worked 2 jobs, driving a school bus in the mornings and stocking shelves at a grocery store at night. He didn't earn much, but he made every dollar count, stretching it just enough to keep the lights on, the fridge half full, and Lily smiling. Lily was his world. She had her mother's bright eyes and warm heart. Michael's wife, Emily, had passed away from illness when Lily was just 2 years old, and from that moment on, Michael promised he would be both mom and dad. He would raise Lily with kindness, honesty, and love. Even on the days when life felt heavy, when exhaustion weighed him down, he made sure Lily never felt the burden of his struggles. On the other side of the country, in a skyscraper high above the streets of Manhattan, lived Alexandra Reed, 42 years old, elegant, sophisticated, and one of the most successful CEOs in America. She ran a tech company valued in the billions. People saw her as confident, brilliant, and unstoppable. The media painted her as the perfect example of success. But behind closed doors, Alexandra lived a very different life. There were no family photos in her penthouse. No warm laughter echoing in her home. No one to share dinners with, no one to call after a long day. She had grown up in foster care, had climbed her way to success alone, and learned early on that trusting people often led to disappointment. So she built walls, tall, thick walls, and filled her life with business, achievements, and work. She had everything, except someone to care for, or someone who cared for her. One winter morning, everything changed. During a board meeting, Alexandra suddenly felt dizzy. The room blurred, the voices of her executives faded, and before anyone could reach her, she collapsed. The diagnosis was severe, her kidneys were failing. She needed a transplant as soon as possible. Without it, her future was uncertain. For someone with her power and resources, solutions usually came quickly. But this time, money couldn't buy her a miracle. Weeks passed, and no donor was found. Alexandra, who had always handled every crisis on her own, now lay in a hospital bed, surrounded by silence and fear. For the first time in years, she cried, not for her company, not for her reputation, but for her life, and the painful truth that she had no one to lean on. Meanwhile, miles away in Ohio, Michael and Lily went about their weekly routine. Every year, they visited the local hospital where Emily had once been treated, bringing homemade cookies to the doctors and nurses as a way to keep her memory alive. It was their tradition, one that reminded them to give thanks, even in sadness. As they walked through the hospital hallway, Lily skipping beside him, Michael noticed a flyer pinned to a bulletin board. It read, "Kidney donor needed, blood type O, save a life." Most people would walk past without thinking twice. But Michael stopped. Something pulled at him, maybe because he once knew what it felt like to desperately hope for a miracle. Maybe because he had seen how a life could slip away too soon. Or maybe because kindness was so deeply rooted in him that walking away wasn't an option. He took down the number. Later that night, after Lily fell asleep, Michael sat alone in the dim light of their living room. He thought about the risks. Surgery wasn't simple. Recovery would mean missing work. Missing work meant missing paychecks. Missing paychecks meant bills piling up, rent overdue, and groceries harder to afford. And Lily, she needed him. He was her only parent. But then he remembered Emily's last words to him, spoken with love even in her weakest days. "Michael, promise me you'll raise Lily to be kind. Show her that kindness is never wasted." And with that, his heart made the decision his mind kept questioning. He signed up to be tested. Days later, the call came. He was a match. A rare, perfect match. The doctors explained everything again, the risks, the recovery, the possible complications. They gave him time to decide. He didn't need it. He agreed. Michael never asked who the recipient was. He didn't need to know their name, their background, or whether they deserved it. Someone needed help. And he could help. That was enough. When the hospital informed Alexandra that a donor had been found, she assumed it was arranged through her connections, or someone hoping for a reward. But when they told her it was an anonymous donor from a small town in Ohio, a man who asked for nothing in return, she didn't know how to process it. No one had ever done something so selfless for her. On the day of the surgery, Michael held Lily's hand tightly. She was nervous, and so was he, but when she asked, "Daddy, why are you doing this?" he knelt beside her and said with a smile, "Because somewhere out there is a little girl, just like you, who needs her mom or dad to stay. If I can help keep them together, then I should." The surgery was successful. Michael recovered slowly, but with courage. Alexandra's body accepted the kidney, and her health began to improve for the first time in months. But life, as it often does, tested Michael again. Because he missed too many days of work, one of his employers replaced him. Bills started stacking up. Groceries became lighter. The struggles returned. A week after surgery, Alexandra asked to meet the man who had saved her life. She expected someone wealthy, powerful, or connected. Instead, the door opened, and in walked Michael wearing a simple hoodie, looking tired but kind, and his daughter, Lily, holding a handmade get-well-soon card. Alexandra felt her throat tighten. "You did this for me," she whispered. Michael smiled humbly. "You needed help. That was enough." For the first time in her life, Alexandra hugged someone not because she had to, but because her heart needed to. As days passed, Alexandra grew close to Lily, whose innocence melted the last pieces of ice around her heart. Lily would visit with drawings, jokes, or flowers from outside the hospital. Alexandra laughed, genuinely laughed, in a way she hadn't in years. When Michael was well enough to return home, Alexandra insisted on visiting them a few weeks later. She wanted to see how they lived, to understand the sacrifice he had made. What she saw broke her heart. A small apartment, second-hand furniture, bills on the kitchen table, yet warmth in every corner. Love lived there even when comfort didn't. So Alexandra made a decision not out of pity, but out of gratitude and admiration. She quietly paid the rent they owed, arranged part-time work for Michael that allowed him more time with Lily, and created a school scholarship fund in Lily's name. But she didn't stop there. She helped renovate the local community learning center and named it after Michael, to honor the kindness that had inspired her to live differently. Over time, what began as an act of kindness from a stranger turned into something far greater: friendship, family, and a bond no money could buy. Michael didn't just save Alexandra's life. He changed her entire understanding of love. And Alexandra didn't just repay a favor. She opened her heart and finally learned what it meant to belong. Kindness is powerful. It can heal, rebuild, connect, and transform lives in ways we may never expect. One act of kindness from a single father not only saved a life, it created a ripple that touched an entire community. So, as you finish this story, ask yourself again. If you had the chance to help someone, even a stranger, would you? Because kindness is never wasted. It always finds a way back. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to your channel name for more uplifting stories that remind us of the good still left in the world. And remember, when in doubt, choose kindness. Would you like me to?